How do you stop perfectionism in your sketches, drawings, or other art? In this video, I'd like to share with you some ways to tell if you might be a perfectionist, as well as some strategies that will help you to embrace imperfection so you can overcome the fear of getting started and actually bring more of your artwork to completion. Hello everybody, this is Jack with Let's Draw Today, and this video is a little different from the usual videos that I make, and I thought it would be a good idea to do some of these videos every now and then to answer some common questions and problems that beginning artists often have that are outside of the usual scope of my normal drawing tutorial videos, which I'll still make some of those too, but I'd like to start making some of these as well, just to change things up a little bit. And as you can tell from the intro of this video, this one is about perfectionism and how to stop it in your art, whether it's, whether you like to draw or use some other kind of medium. I think it will apply regardless. Just like every other field out there, there's no doubt about the prevalence of perfectionism in the art community. And perfectionism is something that a lot of us have. I have it for sure, but it's not necessarily something that you want to keep doing, because it can have a tendency to ruin your creativity and your relationship with your art if you're looking too critically at your art, and if you're doing it so much so that you are putting yourself down and losing motivation and losing joy. So with that said, let's see if we can better understand what perfectionism is and look at some ways to overcome it. First of all, let's see if we can define what perfectionism is. Perfectionism means you're so fixated on the details that you never begin, or you begin but you never finish. Some signs of perfectionism include just having to have that perfect setup, that perfect environment before you can start anything. And in many ways, perfectionism is closely related to procrastination. And as an example, as I say, waiting to get those perfect drawing materials, or finding the perfect lesson to follow along online, or finding the perfect instructor before you even try. Another common trait of perfectionism is over-planning and under-delivering. Perfectionism often involves planning out your steps in great detail, whether just in your mind or on paper too, and checking off each and every step to the best of your ability. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's how a lot of us get things done. But if you have a list of 1,000 steps and you have to check off every single one of them before you can call something complete, then you can see how that can drag things out and cause you not to be able to finish things. And another common sign of perfectionism is you have to keep fixing something. You're constantly fixing, you're getting excessive feedback, and you're making a lot of improvements that don't need to be made. Again, getting feedback and making improvements, that's not a bad thing. That is a good thing. But when you do it to an excessive point, that's when it can become a problem. There's also this idea about perfectionism and its connection to the fear of failure. Like just fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not meeting expectations. And we often see this when it comes to sharing your art online. First of all, there's that fear of what you may think about your work and yourself, and the fear that your art might reinforce some negative beliefs you have about yourself. But there's also that fear of what others may think. But one way to look at that is most of the people that you encounter online are not people that you're going to meet in person. And another thing to remember is that most people have good intentions and most people do mean well. So you can use any of that feedback that you get, especially providing that it's constructive feedback, and you can implement that on the next piece of art. Now, I'm sharing this video about perfectionism, but that doesn't mean I'm an expert at avoiding it. I'm not immune to this at all. It's something that I'm working on, and I thought that it would be great to just share what I'm learning as far as how I'm working to overcome it, and hopefully that can help some of you as well. But I'm still a perfectionist in many ways. I see something wrong with every drawing or every sketch that I finish if I look at it long enough. And it's something in my life as well, something in my outside of my everyday drawing, something that I'll see in my everyday life. Like for example, just doing the dishes. I spend an incredibly long period of time, longer than necessary, doing the dishes. And I have a dishwasher, but I still feel the need to get the dishes spotless for some reason. And if something's caked up on the dishes, I've got to pre-wash and all that, pre-rinse before I put it in the dishwasher. And then if it's kicked on too much, I'm spending way too much time cleaning them, and it's not adding any value to my life. So that's just one of many examples of how I have perfectionism in my life, and I need to get better at it. But it's also in my art too, and I'm a little bit better at handling it when it comes to my drawings. But it's still there. Like if I want to do a quick sketch, if I want to just spend 5 minutes on it, sometimes it can turn into 20 minutes. Or for a realistic drawing, for something more realistic, I can spend an hour or more on it. And I'll talk about this a bit more, but with realistic drawings, spending extra time isn't a bad thing. That's something you want to do, but you have to find somewhat of a balance with it. I love making realistic drawings and even quicker sketches that have realistic qualities. But the thing you have to watch out for is if you're creating any sort of realistic art, you're much more prone to perfectionism than someone who has a looser, more abstract creative style. With realistic art, you're trying to get everything just right, just as close to reality as possible. And the better you get at realism, the greater the possibility that you will seek perfection over completion. Now let's look at some of the benefits of embracing imperfection. You want to remember that imperfection is part of the artistic process, and when you get to doing it, things often don't go as you originally planned. You will often hit obstacles, you'll encounter interruptions, you'll experience other unforeseen circumstances, and these things can sometimes lead you down to a different path than you originally planned. But that should be welcomed because those unplanned occurrences can add elements of interest and uniqueness that may have otherwise not been there. Even when you're not being perfect with your art, you're getting practice. And whether it's good practice or even bad practice, but if you're getting some kind of practice and you're putting in your repetitions, that's how you get better. Because otherwise, if you're waiting to be perfect before calling something done, you're not getting enough of the experience you need to improve. Furthermore, what you think is perfect now is likely far from perfect as far as your future self is concerned. Not only that, but the very thing about your artwork that you might find is imperfect could very well be what others come to appreciate about it. You just never know until you get it out there. Now, in just a minute, we're going to take a look at some tips for overcoming perfectionism in your art. But before that, if you're finding this video to be helpful, please like it, share, and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to click that notification bell so you don't miss new videos. Okay, let's look at some ways that we can stop perfectionism, or at least slow down the occurrence of it. One way to do that is by experimenting with different styles and different techniques without fear of failure. This could be using the same medium that you usually use, or just exploring and experimenting with different ways to use that medium, or it could be trying some other medium or techniques. And this is especially good to keep in mind when you're trying something new, because there's no reason to be perfect when you're just learning something. So trying new things, new approaches, new techniques is a great way to overcome perfectionism, or at least get in the habit of doing so, because you're less likely to engage in perfectionism if you're starting to learn something new. Another way to embrace imperfect art is by creating it on purpose as a warm-up. So for example, just take a few minutes at the beginning of your drawing session and just create something that you know is going to be not what you want to do for a finished product. It could be something messy, something rough, something very unpolished, but you're doing it that way on purpose. Something simple and repetitive like drawing circles or triangles or squiggly lines or some other kind of drill is another example. But just doing something and just practicing on doing and being without any attachment to a final outcome. Now, along those lines, you can practice mindfulness and staying present in the creative moment. Now, this is good when you have a less rigid attachment to any specific goals of a drawing, and is a great way to not worry about the outcome. Just get lost in the creation for however long you plan to work on your drawing. Okay, now speaking of goals, it is also good to set realistic goals for each drawing session. This helps you to achieve a better alternative to perfectionism, which is the concept of completion, which means calling it essentially complete, even if it's not perfect. Before you can set a goal, you need an idea of something to draw, and you might have a lot of ideas in your head. So you might have too many ideas to start, and that might be why you're not starting. But you can list those ideas and then sort them in the order that's most pleasing to you. Then just begin with the first one. Now you might, another area to consider is you might wonder, how does perfectionism come to play when you are trying to master a specific skill? You'd think you have to be perfect to show mastery, but this is far from the case. Try redefining what success looks like to you. Try deciding what you can realistically accomplish within a set amount of time. Then say to yourself, if I can do this much today, then today was a very good day. And even if you don't finish it, but you do some of it, it's good because it's better than nothing. And if you can do more, then that's even better still. So once you have your goals set up for your drawing sessions, for a series of drawing sessions, whether that would be practicing routine drills or mastering a specific skill, or even just completing certain drawing subjects, the next step is to recognize the importance of learning the process over the final product. One of the things we talked about earlier when we were identifying perfectionism is just not having the right setup or the right materials, but you can overcome that by just getting started. When it comes to drawing, if you just have a piece of paper and a pencil and an eraser, you don't need all the other fancy supplies that might be overwhelming to you. Just get started and just try to build a routine. Just do a little bit, even if you're not in the right mindset. Then eventually your state of mind will soon follow up with your actions. We also talked a minute ago about having too many ideas. But on the flip side of that, you might have no ideas. You might have some kind of constant creative block. But the way to overcome that is just to lower your expectations, pick something, and it doesn't have to be the perfect idea. Just pick something just enough to allow yourself to get started. This is why I encourage so many beginners to sketch something every day, even if it's for just a few minutes a day. It may seem like you're not making any progress, but you're putting in the reps, putting in the repetitions. You're showing up every day to sketch something, and you just might surprise yourself as to what you can do over time. A good way to see this is to put the date at the bottom or the back of your sketches or your other artwork. And that way you can see for yourself when you look back at your work from a year ago and compare it to what you can do now, you can see for yourself the progress that you're making. Even if most of those, or even if all of those pieces weren't considered perfect to you as you were finishing them. And if you're trying to master a certain skill, the same rule can apply. Just spend a set amount of time each day or week practicing that specific skill. That repetition of doing it over and over again, getting some feedback, and gradually making improvements will have you master something far more effectively than just trying to master it in one session. So it's really important to make creating a habit. Try to decide on a set frequency for creating art. Daily is ideal, but you can do weekly, you can do whatever works best for your life and your goals. But set a schedule and do your best to stick to it. Do your best to complete each session, regardless of whether or not the artwork from each session is perfect. Okay, so how do you know when a session is complete? Here's where time constraints can come in handy. You can use time constraints to prevent overthinking and those perfectionist tendencies. Time limits are helpful because you concentrate on capturing the most important elements or the essence of your subject within the time frame. And whatever details don't make it into the artwork, they just don't make it in. The practice of using those time limits can help you become more comfortable with being imperfect, but you get better at actually completing your drawings. The goal with the time limits is not to stress you out, but to rather to relieve you of the stress that comes from perfectionism. Now, I do have a love-hate relationship with time and deadlines. Like, let's say when my wife and I are playing a game that involves time limits, I don't often do too well because the games usually involve thought, and I don't think that well under pressure. But it's a little bit different I find anyway, it's a little bit different when setting a time limit with my art, because I'm in a state of flow and the time limits I set are based on my goals for that particular piece. Now, for realistic art, extra time is okay because that's one of the biggest contributors to realism. If you're trying to create a very realistic drawing, it's often expected for that to take many hours. But at some point, you do have to call it done. Now, another tip for helping with perfectionism is to look at your big projects and break them down into smaller, more manageable tasks. For example, if you look at your larger overall goals for a drawing and you define what success looks like to you, think of everything that you'd like to have in that finished piece and write it down if you have to. And then think about the 80-20 rule. And if you haven't heard about the 80-20 rule, it says that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your output. So if you have this list of things that you want in your final drawing or your final piece of artwork, identify a few must-haves from your list and set a goal to complete those things at a minimum. Once those things are done, you can get ready to call your work complete, even if it's missing some other things from your list that are less important. Okay, I'd like to share with you a few other coping strategies for perfectionist tendencies, and these are some things that I've noticed myself and other people have noticed a difference when they've implemented these things. First is to recognize every small step towards completion along the way as a small win. Those tiny milestones can really add up and build your motivation and build your confidence. Second is to create a positive and supportive artistic community. Now, that means you can start off by just sharing your work with a very small circle of friends and family and try to get some positive feedback, some constructive criticism. And once you feel more certain and confident in your work, then you can spread that small circle out into a wider audience. Now, that constructive feedback, that's really, really helpful, and it's much better than focusing on perfection. So often, one of the things that causes perfectionism is when we compare ourselves to others, or when we compare our artwork to what other people can do that might be more advanced than us. Now, in order to counter that, you can try to reframe any envious thoughts into feelings of inspiration. See what you can learn from them. Ask them for advice. If you're in a Facebook group, that's a great place to ask for advice from your drawings, and then people that might be more experienced can give you tips and pointers. And when you ask for advice, try to be very specific on what you'd like to improve. That way they can better help you. And make a point to practice whatever it is you wish to improve within yourself and your work. As you're trying to counter perfectionism, you're obviously going to make mistakes. So you have to get comfortable with making those mistakes and trying to learn from them and view them as opportunities for growth. I talked a few minutes ago about looking at some of your past work and seeing your progress. Now, an even better way to see how much you've improved over time is to draw the same thing that you drew a year ago so you can get a better comparison. Now, one of the ways I try to overcome perfectionism in my art, or one of the ways I try to overcome seeing faults in my drawings, is to look for more of the things that I like and that I appreciate about my work than the things that I don't like. So if I focus more on the positive things and less on the few things that I don't like, then things go a lot smoother for me because I'm motivated to keep going and continue and try another day. There's always tomorrow. Finally, remember to do your best to find joy and satisfaction within the creative process itself, because it's easy to lose motivation when you are an artist, especially when you're just learning. But remember that creating art is, at its core, it's about having fun, and it's about the positive feelings that you get from the creation process itself. And sometimes it's okay to keep things light and just create art for your eyes only. So if you're not really feeling it, if you're not really feeling a piece of art, or you're not really that excited to share or get feedback, it's okay just to keep some to yourself every once in a while. But the idea is you keep doing it and keep doing it, and you keep trying. All right, everybody. So in this video, we talked about how perfectionism can mess us up with our art. We looked at what perfectionism is and how to embrace completion over perfection. And we looked at some ways to stop or slow down perfectionism. Now, I'd like to hear what you have to say. If you have any personal examples about perfectionism in the course of creating your art, or if you have any ways of overcoming it that have worked for you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Now, if you're not already a member of my Facebook group, I highly encourage you to join my Facebook group, and the link is in the description below. It's called Pencil Sketching for Beginners and Beyond. It's a very safe, very supportive community. People are more than willing to cheer you on and give you any feedback on anything you ask. I post daily sketching prompts just to get members in the habit of getting started and drawing something every day. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to wrap this video up. I hope you were able to learn something from it. If you're just getting started with drawing and you would like some guidance to get going, click on the screen right now for more drawing lessons from Let's Draw Today. As always, thank you so much for joining me today.